Welcome back for another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. In today's episode, which is being released on the 4th of July, obviously we wanted to have a guest that we could really focus on history with. I've tried hard so many times to go back and learn history and dates and events from our area, and it seems that it never sticks. But as I've been getting older, I feel like I'm starting to pick up on things and learning a lot more about the history of our area. So I was excited to have Nathan Stalvey come in today. He is the executive director of the Clarke County Historical Association and has a large amount of knowledge when it comes to history, way beyond any understanding I have. So I'm going to learn so much today, and I hope you do too, but how does this connect to leadership? So today's episode is Independence Starts Local, Civic Leadership Through Historical Advocacy, and thinking about historical advocacy is something I've never really done before, and so this is very unique for me, but really thinking about how history shapes leadership in our community and the ways in which we can get involved and make a difference in historical preservation is so important. So I'm excited to invite Nathan in today. I'm going to have him share a little bit about himself, and then I can't wait to dig into this topic. So welcome, Nathan. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
I am too. I have already learned something today, that your wedding anniversary is coming up. So congratulations on a year of marriage.
Thank you very much. Very excited. Yeah, we got married at our historic mill last year. It was quite exciting, quite hot, but it was very exciting. But yeah, we're celebrating 1 year of marriage.
Yes, congratulations. That's awesome. But it also shows how much you really do love what you do, because you chose to get married on site there.
I do. And, my wife also notices that, because in my wedding ring, she actually took pieces of stone from the side of the mill and had it put in my wedding ring.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah, it is. This ring has not left my finger since I put it on.
Oh, that is so special. I love that. Well, I know the listeners would love to hear a little bit about your background, personally and professionally, and how you even came to the area to begin with. So if you could share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I have been in the museum field for about 25 years now. I started out at the University of South Carolina. I was born and raised in South Carolina, and I went to school at the University of South Carolina. I got my bachelor's in history and my master's in public history and museum management, all at the University of South Carolina. Worked at their museum, what was called McKissick Museum. Okay. And I worked there as an undergraduate and as a grad student, and then right after I graduated with my master's, I got hired there full-time as a curator of traveling exhibits and graphic design. Okay. So all told, I was there 10 years, and then I got to a point in my career. I was like, well, in the museum field, if you're 99% of the time, if you're wanting to move up and work your way up to a leadership role, you've got to be willing to move. It's very rare that a person stays in the same museum and works their way up. Okay. So you kind of have to be prepared to move and to another museum to get up into your career. So then I moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and was the director of exhibits and head of collections at the Louisville Slugger Baseball Museum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was really good. I'm a big baseball fan, huge baseball fan. And I was there for 4 years, and then the position that I'm at now opened up, and it was my chance to finally be a director, to lead an organization. And I've been here for 10 years, and that's what brought me to Virginia.
That's an awesome story. I didn't know some of those things too. So you said you were into baseball. You're still into baseball,
right? Oh, yes,
right?
Absolutely. I'm a huge baseball fan.
So what is your favorite team?
The Los Angeles Dodgers.
Okay.
And I had not even been to California. I was 34 when I visited California for the first time. So I just grew up pulling for the Dodgers because they had the color blue, and they beat the team that I didn't like, the Atlanta Braves, because everybody liked the Braves in South Carolina, and so I wanted to be the nonconformist and pulled for the team that beat them.
Well, that tells me a lot about you, Nathan. That's so funny. No, I love that. I was wondering the connection to that team specifically, but that's cool. So I tend to start episodes, especially in season 1, I did this by asking when you first felt like you were a leader and really truly identified as a leader, because a lot of times people associate it with a title, which might not be the case at all. So it's always interesting to hear, when did you first see yourself as a leader?
Honestly, I would say it was when I was at the Louisville Slugger Museum. The seeds were starting to get planted when I was at the University of South Carolina's McKissick Museum, because nobody reported to me. I had one grad assistant, but it was shared amongst the department. And I was constantly having ideas like, ooh, here are things we can do to make it better. Here are ways we can work better together. But it kind of fell on deaf ears because I was the lowest person on the totem pole. And a lot of people had been there. My colleagues had been there for 20 plus years, and my voice wasn't quite heard. But then I go to the Louisville Slugger Museum, and I'm in charge of a museum staff. And this is the first time where I have people working for me, and I get to handpick my crew. And so at that point, that's when I just, now I get to be a leadership. And it's more than just delegating and telling people what to do. It's, in a lot of ways, a lot of my staff were younger, just getting into the museum field or just getting into the sports world. And I was a mentor. I was kind of helping them along the way. It's like, hey, I don't want you to just come here and do your job. I want you to learn. I want you to grow. And it was just immediate. That's what I went to. And I'm still the same way. Just anybody I hire, I don't want them to just simply do their job. I want them to grow in it. I want them to learn and one day be leaders themselves. But I would say it was when I was in Kentucky is when I got that first experience.
About what age was that?
I moved to Kentucky in 2000, so it was in my mid-30s.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was my early to mid-30s when I moved to Kentucky and took over staff and then hired some new people. And it was at that point, I'd never really seen myself as a leader until then, because I'm in a field that I love, doing what I love, and I want other people to love what they do. And I think that's what set that need to be a leader right at the beginning.
Great reflection. So I don't know how many episodes you've heard, if any. Are you a listener? It's okay if you're not. Have you listened to my podcast before?
I've tapped into a few episodes, not been able to listen to all the way through, but just to kind of get a feel for what to expect when coming in here. So
yeah, hopefully not some of the original ones, because that's pretty embarrassing.
More recent ones, I'll say. Some of the more recent. I can't remember who was on it, but I just kind of listened to small clips and just so I could get a feel for what this is like. But now I'm going to be an avid listener.
There you go. Well, that's one way to get listeners, right? Well, the reason I say that is it's always interesting for me to hear when people identified as leaders, because I was like you, it was in my 30s, and so many people identified as leaders when they were children.
Wow.
Yeah, and it blows my mind, like whether it was leading in the classroom when it came to a project, and they're like, yeah, I was having an influence on these folks around me. I'm like, you grasped the concept much before I did. So I'm glad that we were in the 30s together.
Oh, trust me, if you would have met me as a kid, leadership was the last thing. I was the quietest, most introverted kid. I sat at the back of the classroom. I had just a small core group of friends. I mean, I sat first chair in band, clarinet player, and I know that all the other clarinet players really liked me, but they, later in life, they said, we saw you as a leader, and I didn't see myself as a leader at all, but I just got along with people, but I was very shy and introverted. So yeah, definitely not when I was a kid. That did not start as a kid.
Well, but others had the perspective that you were. So it's, I love hearing the different perspectives. You were obviously having an impact and making a difference. You just didn't realize how much.
I didn't realize it, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So your entire background has to do with history. What even led to this interest in the first place? Was there like a defining moment for you where you're like, I love history, I'm going to study history? Honestly,
I had always loved history even as a kid. But the thought of actually working in that field didn't occur to me until I was in college. In fact, not even right when I got to college. I started out as a music major. I was graduating high school. I got accepted to college, and I had to say, well, I got to figure out what I want to major in. And I had parents and teachers and friends like, oh, major in music. You're good at music. Major in music. And I was like, well, they're adults. They know. And the first year was okay, and then the grades went down. I struggled. It was making something that I enjoy doing as a hobby into something more professional, and I wasn't comfortable with that. I enjoyed playing the clarinet and saxophone like I enjoyed playing basketball. As a hobby, I was pretty good at it, but I'm not going to try out for the NBA. So it was, I lost the love for it, and then one day I decided, what can I do? I want to stay in the humanities field, and history was something I'd always been fascinated with. I'd always got A's in history in school. Those were my favorite classes, and I decided, let me take a stab at history. Fell in love with it. I mean, every class, it was just so easy. And the more I got into those history classes, upper level history classes, then it got easier and easier and more fun. But then I get to my junior year, I was like, okay, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with this degree in history. So my advisor was very smart. She says, okay, the better question, what do you not want to do? And I said, I don't want to teach. I don't want to go to law school. I was like, where does that leave me? And she says, well, how about museums? I was like, all right. So I got set up with an internship at McKissick Museum in the exhibits department. They gave me an office. I was so happy. My office was literally so tiny that when I backed my chair up from my desk, it hit the other wall. I had to actually climb over the chair. It was literally, and this is literally a converted broom closet.
Oh.
It felt, I don't know if you've ever watched The Office, but when Ryan is stuck in that little broom closet, that was basically the size of my office. Oh, no. Except I did have a window.
It's humbling.
Yes. But within 1 week, I was like, this is what I was put on earth to do.
Wow.
That was 25 years ago, and it's not wavered. Like, it was just, I just knew.
What a cool story. Well, I think it's awesome when people just know, because there are plenty of adults that still don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and we have so many interests, and what direction do we go in? And I come across so many people who, you know, are in a transitional phase of their life, and maybe they're leaving a certain career field and don't know what to do next. Well, when you have so many talents and so many interests, it's hard to pick one. I've always joked that I want to spend like 1 week in like every position that I can, and start a business going in and providing feedback on their onboarding process.
Nice.
By just spending some time with them, learning, seeing it in action, and then going and spending time in a new role, because I just think it's so cool. But I love that you stuck with yours.
I did. It was just, and again, like 25 years, and there's obviously been stressful days at times.
Oh, yeah.
There have been some, low points, but even on the lowest points, I still wake up the next day. It's like, I can't wait to go to work.
Yeah.
This is what I love doing. Like, I can't imagine doing anything else. And I'm very fortunate that I'm like that. Some people say I just don't like change very much, which is true. I don't like change very much. I like to grow, but I don't like to, like moving is my least favorite thing on the planet, but yeah.
Well, how does your work with preserving history connect back to today, when this episode's being released is going to be 4th of July, Independence Day? How do the two connect in your mind?
Connecting preserving history with
the Independence Day.
With Independence Day. Well, it's especially good now because we're approaching our nation's 250th anniversary. And we're seeing this. I'm very fortunate to live in a county, in Clarke County, where everybody loves their history and they love to see it preserved, and they're very supportive of me and the organization. But as we're getting closer to these 250th anniversary, we're seeing more people getting involved and more people liking it. And as we're approaching Independence Day, it's this sense of, hey, we got to look to the past to plan our path forward. We have to look that you cannot. I mean, it's like the old saying, those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it, which we've seen countless times in our history.
Yeah.
And my role is to make sure that history is there so that the future generations can see it. And we can, when we get to talking about the mill later, I can tell you how I've been able to do that with these next generations.
Okay, very cool. You mentioned Clarke County. So listeners might be all over the place and have no idea where Clarke County is. Can you describe the area a little bit so that our listeners know Clarke County?
Yes. So Clarke County, if you know where Winchester's at, you look on the map of Virginia, you look at the very top point of the state, that's where Winchester and Frederick County is at. Clarke County is immediately east of that. And it's an interesting history. Clarke County is very, very different from all the counties around it, and it's rooted in its history. The county was part of Frederick County up until 1836.
Okay.
And a lot of the people settled in Clarke County in the 18th century, early 19th century, they came up from the Tidewater region. They were some of that Virginia aristocracy, some of the planters, the tobacco planters, where the tobacco industry was dying. They wanted to grow wheat. So they settled in the area which is now Clarke County, because Lord Fairfax says, hey, come on up. A lot of this looks like England, doesn't it? So yes, come on up and settle this area. So Clarke County settles in the area, and then in 1836, they're like, you know what? We don't want to be like what's going on in Winchester. We want our own identity.
Okay.
And so they broke off and became their own county. And it's extremely different. Again, you've got all these historic houses, most of them privately owned, that date back well to the early 19th century. And they're still around. I mean, people just Most of the county's in conservation easement, and so knowing where Clarke County's at and how it's different from the other counties, it's all rooted in that history of like, hey, we want to not have a lot of change. Mm-hmm. It took 33 years for them to get a McDonald's in the county. That shows you they're like, we want to keep our history as it is.
Yes. Well, then it's a perfect fit for you.
Oh, very much so. It makes my job a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay, so people know where it's located and what makes it a little different. Is there a very specific event that happened in Clarke County or a specific landmark that maybe people don't know very well that you could share out?
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot that's happened in Clarke County, but I would say there were two significant battles in the Civil War in Clarke County. One was the Battle of Cool Spring, which is, I think a lot of people don't realize, it's a pretty major battle. I mean, there were a lot of casualties on both sides, and Cool Spring Battlefield is owned and operated by Shenandoah University, and it's right as soon as you cross the Shenandoah River. And you're going eastbound on 7, and you take a left, and it's right there, the Cool Springs Battlefield. They have a small visitor center, and you can learn a lot about that history.
Okay.
And there's one Battle of Berryville. It's more of a skirmish that took place basically in the area of where the current Clarke County High School is at. And so these were precursors to Gettysburg. So this was kind of things are starting to line up for how things are about to shape up in Antietam and Gettysburg. This happened like right before. So there's some things that I think a lot of people might not know about.
Well, yeah, and I mean, confession, I didn't know about either of those things.
Right, yeah.
And, drive past them all the time. So you have to think that unless people are seeking knowledge in this specific area and there's adequate signage to show you what's around, where you're even paying attention to it, there's so much history surrounding us that we're missing out on. So thank goodness for you.
Oh, that's my job, is to try to raise that awareness for sure.
So obviously, you're a leader in the community in so many ways. I mean, you're involved in the chamber. I don't even know all the things you're involved in, Nathan. So I know there's a lot. But what specific leadership qualities do you think have really helped you to be successful in historical preservation? In
historic preservation, I will say 7 years ago, well, I guess it's 8 years now, I joined the Virginia Association of Museums Council.
Okay.
And the Virginia Association of Museums is one of the largest museum associations in the country. And to be on that council that speaks for the museum professionals that work at museums across the state. I mean, we're in a state with Mount Vernon and Monticello and Yorktown and Jamestown. And it's so unbelievable to have been on that council for 6 years. And I got to meet so many people through being on the council, going to council meetings, learning from people across the state, learning how to be good leaders. I learned most people on that council were directors themselves. Okay. Some from large museums, some from small museums like mine, some from science museums, some from art museums. And it really kind of showed me a few things. Number one, that people, by and large, who work in museums in Virginia, they love what they do. Mm-hmm. They're very passionate about what they do. And number two, I learned a lot from a lot of directors, because I was a director for the first time, and I was looking, it's like, okay, there's a lot I still need to learn, and I was able to learn from other colleagues, other museum directors, about how they did things, and learning where those grants were at, and learning, new ideas to approach for programs and donor cultivation. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot, and I'm in touch with all these people constantly. It's an ongoing kind of benefit to have had to be able to make so many connections that way. I think that's where a lot of that leadership, that's where my leadership really started to help, is in historic preservation.
So obviously you made a lot of connections there. Mm-hmm. What are some other key connections that you feel that you've made where you've built a relationship and had to maintain it in order to be successful in what you do?
Oh, there's so many. We can talk for an hour on that one. We can talk for an hour on that one. I will say, so when I got to my last year on the Virginia Association of Museums Council, I started debating whether or not I wanted to stay on the executive committee. And
okay.
At the time, the organization was going through a major transition, and I knew that was, if I stayed on as exec, because I was asked to stay on an executive committee, that I'd be there another potentially 6 years, mm-hmm. and it was going to require 2 to 3 times more commitment. And I'm way up here in Clarke County, which is 2.5 hours from Richmond, and a lot of these meetings are in Richmond.
Okay.
And it was going to be a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot more work than I think I was prepared for. And so I started thinking, it's like, okay, if I don't want to do this. What do I do next? And then the Chamber of Commerce, the Top of Virginia Regional Chamber of Commerce, reached out to me about being a member. And all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. It's like, do you have any board position openings? And they're like, yes, we do, actually. And so I talked with Cynthia Schneider, who's the CEO. And we talked a little bit about what that would look like. And they were desperate to get people from Clarke County on there. And I joined that, and now I've been on there a couple of years now. And one of the things I love is that now it was tough at first, because when I was on the Virginia Association Museums Council, I was with other museum professionals. There was a lot in common.
Okay.
Now I'm on this board with realtors and financial advisors and small business owners that have nothing to do with history. CEOs of banks, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I can't talk historic preservation. We can't talk about what it's like to, hire a curator. But it also helped me look at running the Historical Association as a business and how to make that business a part of the community. Mm-hmm. And I think the Chamber has helped me grow in a lot of ways, because now I see, okay, now I know how to connect with people outside of history. Mm-hmm. Now I know how to really talk about the history of people who might not care about history, but understands the value of having an historical organization in the community and what we provide and how we partner with other local businesses and other people that have nothing to do with history. And that has been a great, great benefit. And now I'm the chair of the Public Policy Committee, and that's opened doors where I'm now, connected with all of our local elected officials, from town council to county council to state, to the state level and the General Assembly, all the way up to to our congressman's office. And I have connections with every level now, and it's also helped me build a deep connection with the Clarke County Board of Supervisors even stronger now, because I know, I understand how all the politics work behind the scenes and how you can make those relationships work. It's helped me become a better leader in a different way than the Virginia Association of Museums has.
I love that you shared that, because it is so common to kind of gravitate towards people like you, common interests, right? Share that passion with other people that already love it too. Mm-hmm. But seeing the value of surrounding yourself with people who are in completely different industries. And I love what you said about running it like a business. I've heard that my background's in education many times about education and the school system, thinking about how do we run it like a business too, right?
Yeah,
you have to think outside the box. So I like that chamber experience has really brought that for you. I can see that you have a ton of connections. You're right. We could spend an hour on that.
Oh, yeah.
But having you as an advocate is amazing. I know, and it's probably a controversial topic, but so often I'm sure you have to go up against situations where, something is being removed from the area that is a part of our history. And I'm assuming you're advocating for it to stay because you're trying to preserve that history. How many times have you come up against a situation, whether it be one of those or anything else in historical preservation, where things got stalled for you? You didn't know if you were going to be able to achieve your goal, preserve history in the way you wanted to, but you pushed through and made it happen anyway.
So two answers to that question.
Okay.
Obviously. So the first is when you're going back to removing history. I remember back in 2020 when there was the movement to remove a lot of the Confederate monuments. That, for somebody like me, that puts me in the middle, because when you look at my donors, my board members, and our members to our organization, they were pretty evenly split right down the middle as take them down or keep them up.
Yeah, that's
and
tough.
As a museum director, that point, I said, okay, I was asked this all the time. Because they're like, okay, you're the museum director, you're the authority here, what's the correct answer?
Yeah.
And my answer to that was, look, throughout history, statues come and statues go as the tides of politics change, as we evolve.
Yeah.
What I encourage people to do is support your local history organization, support your museums. They're the repositories of all of that historical information, the research. And I would say to people, look, before you form a stance one way or the other, come to your local historical association. Come learn about the statues, why they were put up, who put them up, for what reasons, who was involved. do your research. We have all of this research there at our organization, and a lot of other museums do too. So we encourage people to like support those local history museums because they are part of the community and they're the ones that are the stewards of that history. So then come in, make an educated decision based off doing your own research.
Yeah.
And that was my answer to that.
Okay. So what would you say is the impact of forgetting or not valuing our local history? What outcome?
Oh, the outcome, because then you're losing an identity that you had. You're losing why your county and community exists in the first place. And yes, it does evolve over time, but you have to understand that foundation. You know, you really have to understand that, to know how to shape the future, to know who the people are that are still in the county that have lived there forever. And it helps build those bridges between people who move there, who've never lived in maybe even Virginia, and people who have lived in that county and they're like 5th, 6th generation. By understanding that history, it bridges that gap of understanding. Yeah. And to go back to your other question, you know, was there a time where I was really nervous about something not getting done? Very much so. I will go to our mill dam. So we have an historic mill, the Burrow Morgan Mill, and it is an 18th century water-powered operating grist mill. 1,900 feet upstream, there's a dam that crosses Spout Run Creek where the water is diverted from the creek into the mill. Well, the dam was starting to give way.
Okay.
And one section was starting to leak through, and there were 4 spillways across that dam. If any of those spillways gave way, the water would crash down Spout Run Creek, flood people's properties, and then the mill would go dry. It would not be operating. There would be no water coming into the mill. That kept me up many a night.
Oh, I'm
and
sure.
And then I started looking at costs and for doing the work, and the costs were simply, wow, this is greater than our annual operating budget.
Oh, okay.
And I tried looking for grants, and my first option was like, well, there's these the infrastructure bill, there's money for dam safety projects in the state of Virginia. I immediately went there, and it's like, sorry, but your dam doesn't hold back nearly enough water for you to qualify. I'm like, this is still a significant amount of water, but it would have to basically hold back a small reservoir for us to qualify.
Wow.
So I was getting really nervous, and then I started leaning into the connections I made through the chamber, especially the political connections. And it was a combination of the chamber connections and my museum connections on how to advocate for a budget amendment in the General Assembly. And I worked with our delegate, Dolores Oates, who introduced a budget amendment for $850,000. We worked with her on the amount, and that money was going to go to help the mill dam, our archives, and make some much-needed preservation repairs in our mill. And it was a long process. It was a fun process. I got to go down to the General Assembly, meet with delegates and senators. I even brought them pieces of cornbread using cornmeal ground at the mill.
Oh, look at you!
It was trust me. There was one delegate. I ran into his wife, and he says that sealed the deal. Like the cornbread absolutely sealed the deal. And it was so fun. But I enjoyed it every second. It was another one of those things. Like I found a new strength. And I found a new way to kind of lead and make those political connections. And I had an absolute blessing. Not long after that, I became head of the Public Policy Committee because I was like, oh, look at what can be done when you advocate and get to work with your elected officials. And I wanted to pass that on to other people and say, hey, this is what we can do. We can make some actual change here.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Remarkable.
It was a fun story. It was a lot of work, but it was very fun.
Yeah. I'm amazed but you stepped right in and did what it took. I would be so intimidated by the entire process. So this leads me into my next question. So for the average person who's not typically involved in legislature, what can the average person in our community do to get more involved in democracy as a whole, in historical preservation? What does it look like for average me to get involved?
So the first thing I would say is, with the Public Policy Committee on the Chamber, we're always looking for people to join our committee. And it's a great way, even if you're not participatory at first and you just want to kind of soak it in, it's a great way to learn and listen what business members or business leaders, and there are members of town and county council on this, also some former retired lobbyists. So you're really kind of hearing how all of this works and what we can do working with our elected officials. And in coming to some of the programs that we put together, going to your county and town council board of supervisors meetings, just sitting there and just listening, especially the public forum, and just kind of listening to what people are talking about. I would say sit, listen, see what people are talking about. There's always some type of event where you're going to have some members of council out there having certain events. Just follow up with them, see what they're doing, follow their pages, chat with them. I strongly encourage, especially starting on the local level, like in town and county council, reach out to your elected officials, reach out to whoever's representing your ward and just say, hey, I want to be more involved, and here are some of my concerns. They like hearing that. Trust me, elected officials, they're there because they want to make a difference. I know it doesn't seem like that sometimes, but everybody I've talked to, like, they do what they do not because for accolades. And there occasionally you might get somebody like that. But everybody I've talked to, especially our local elected officials, they're like, we are here because we generally want to make our communities better, and we want to listen to the people. And so I that's what I would do. Is I highly encourage just little things like that, and joining the Chamber's Public Policy Committee and just kind of learning a little bit more. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you bring that up about kind of sitting in on the meetings and listening. I had an opportunity within the past year. I work with a couple of local municipalities, and I got invited in to help with the strategic plan for a city council. And of course, in preparation for that, I decided to go back and listen to a ton of the city council meetings and kind of familiarize myself with people and how they might typically relate to one another and what are people coming in and talking about in the community. And man, did that open my eyes to things I had never thought of before, to be completely honest. But I was immediately engaged because they were talking about an area that I was passionate about. And I feel like you're exactly right, that it opens your eyes to so many things, and maybe you would be more comfortable in voicing concerns and realizing that it's actually not that big of a deal to come forward and speak to them. They're like any of us.
You'd be amazed if you approach everything in a professional manner by doing it, because sometimes, and we live in a day and age now where politics can be very heated.
Oh, yeah.
And you can be very passionate about a certain thing, and you might say too much, or you might get a little too animated. At that point, the minute you lose that sense of professionalism, the minute you start getting too heated, that elected official has already shut you off.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Completely done. And when you're doing it professionally, I know that I'm looking to try to do some advocacy both in the General Assembly and on Capitol Hill to look at, hey, just really going around saying, hey, look, as small museums, some of these cuts from the National Endowment of Humanities and the Institute for Museum and Library Services, it's had a trickle-down effect to small places like us.
Okay.
These small community museums, which are a lot of times anchors both for tourism and history and preservation in their communities. And suddenly we're facing shortfalls on how much money we get to spend on our programs now.
Okay.
And it's having this small effect, and I think a lot of elected officials don't realize the effect it's having on the small people, not so much the larger museums. Not only is it having an effect on us like that, but it's also having an effect on us with these larger museums are now applying for state-level grants and foundational grants, and all of these leftover grants that are available now suddenly have 10 times more organizations applying for these funds. And imagine me applying for a private foundational grant.
Okay.
And I'm small little Clarke County Historical Association. I could write the best grant ever. But if the person running this private foundational grant sees, oh, well, Montpelier just, or Yorktown just applied for this grant, it's Yorktown. Of course I'm going to give them that money. So it kind of puts us behind the eight ball a little bit. And that's one of the things I try to advocate for. But by doing so, and I know a lot of my colleagues in the museum field, they want to say some stuff. And they want to say stuff a little bit angrier because they would say, well, we're fiercely defending that. It's like, well, if you're going to come in with boxing gloves on, ready to duke it out, you're not going to be heard. You just got to come in and say your message and do it in a professional manner. And then you get asked back. It's like, hey, can you come and tell us a little bit more about this? We want to hear this. And then you can gradually make that change. That's the way I see it.
That just applies to everything across the board. Yeah. Just the reminder of professionalism. No matter how passionate you are about a cause, just pausing and thinking about how you could approach it professionally, you might get a different outcome.
Absolutely. Every time. You really would.
So you mentioned, programming, and I'm curious, some examples of programming that you have specifically in Clarke County. What are some of the things that people can get involved in?
So with the Historical Association? Yeah. So we have our two big history programs of the year. Colonial Kids Day in July. It's July 12th.
Okay.
It's a fun day. It's a Saturday, 11 to 4. It's $5 a person, so it's really cheap. And we have reenactors. We're grinding grain in the mill. We have scavenger hunts.
Are you going to make me cornbread?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to make you cornbread. In fact, the cornbread the cornmeal that I used to make cornbread with to the General Assembly, we're grinding it that day at Colonial Kids Day. That's so awesome. Absolutely, I can make some good cornbread. Okay. And we're going to have museums from all over the place. We got as far down as Frontier Culture Museum, Loudon Heritage Farm Museum, Sky Meadows, Newtown History Center, Sons of the American Revolution are going to be there. We're going to have like corn husk doll making. We're going to have spinning wheels going on so people can learn how to do seamstressing. A blacksmith's going to be on site. It's a fun day. And Heritage Day is in November. It's the first Saturday in November. Very similar, except we also have a cider press that day. Oh. And we have people out there pressing cider, and you can buy like hand-pressed cider right there on site.
What a cool experience.
Yeah, those are our two big annual history events. And we have talks throughout the year. One I'm particularly looking forward to is in October. It's our colonial whiskey tasting.
Oh, okay.
And so that'll be a day where people can actually try samples of colonial recipes of whiskey.
Yeah. You just got a lot of people's attention. You're I like history now.
Yes, I cannot wait for that one. That's going to be a great one. I did something similar a few years ago, back in 2019, and unfortunately I did it in August. That was a bad idea to do whiskey tasting in hot weather.
Oh, no.
So this time I'm like, let's do it in October. It's a little nicer.
Seems like you do some like really important things in your life during the hottest seasons of the year.
I do that. I should have probably learned that from the wedding. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I'm from South Carolina. It's always hot, so
that's true.
I don't think about it.
Is the humidity the same there, though?
It's way worse.
Is it worse?
Columbia, South Carolina is probably the most humid place in the country because it's surrounded by 3 rivers. Okay. It sits in a bowl, and there's a lake nearby. There's a constant haze over the town.
So we should stop complaining around here.
Oh, when people complain it's humid, it's like, oh yeah, that's cute. Go to Columbia because this is like this for like 5 months in a row.
Well, I'm supposed to be going on a trip out west with Dad, and he's going to be summiting the Tetons, and he's trying to comfort himself that it's going to be a dry heat. It's not going to be the same here. It's going to be like an oven. It's not going to be. I'm like, okay.
The difference between an oven and a frying pan. That's a dry heat. It's still hot.
Yeah. So you shared one great success story. Mm-hmm. That was awesome. I'm sure there are more. Is there anything that you didn't achieve that you set out to do, you were so passionate about? We don't always just share the success around here. Sometimes we come up against some obstacles along the way. Mm-hmm. Have there been any causes specifically in historical preservation that you were all about and then you didn't achieve it?
Well, I will say, I mean, looking at trying to get more funding for museums in general, I'm still constantly working on that. But then when the federal cuts came out, I knew right there, I was like, oh, this is going to trickle down, and this is going to be difficult. I would say we have a museum in downtown Berryville, which it's one of those places I'd kind of hope to really revamp and make a lot better. And it just seems like obstacle after obstacle would just jump in the way. Sometimes it's funding, sometimes it's staffing, sometimes it's just, a lot of different factors. And then other money having to go elsewhere, like the mill dam suddenly came up. That was a critical need. So those are one of the areas that I feel like, I wish I could just concentrate on now. But now I think in the next couple of years, I'm going to be able to finally okay, let's look at this museum. I want to get people back in the doors again because attendance has started to go down and down at the museum. The mill has gone way up, but the museum has gone way down. So I want to kind of bring that museum attendance back up. And we're right in downtown Berryville. So it's going to be a slow process. I just hired a curator of archives and exhibitions, and that's going to be one of their big charges is helping us redo the museum and get people back in there and make people aware, like, hey, this is a great repository of local history that it's open to the public for anybody to use at any time.
It'd be interesting to hear how the numbers have really fluctuated over like the last 5 years. So during the time of COVID, when people were trying to get outside and do things, maybe not in close proximity to one another, was there any outdoor programming that you saw an increase in numbers, or how was that impacted?
After COVID?
Well, yeah. I would say
because we didn't do any like
nothing
during COVID. Yeah. We couldn't really do. We did a lot of online items.
Okay.
We did a lot of YouTube videos.
Interesting.
One of my favorite things, and I'm glad you brought up COVID, because that was a learning experience right there, especially as a leader. That was a year that showed me what I could do as a leader. That turned everything around in my career.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so here we are. I remember we were at the Virginia Association of Museums Conference in Manassas, and it's March of 2020. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about, like, what's going on with this disease thing? So we shake hands, bump elbows, what do we do? And the last day there, everybody starts leaving really early. It's like, we got to get back. This is looking really serious. And there was rumors of a shutdown coming on. And sure enough, the shutdown came like 2 days later. And so I had to sit down, and all of a sudden, we don't know when this is going to end. The numbers just kept, these positive cases kept going up and up and up. And suddenly I'm faced with, oh, wow, we get a significant amount of money from our art show and our programs. And now it's like, you get none of that. No art shows, no programs. You have to find a way as the executive director to keep the lights on, to keep the staff paid, to keep the building operating, to keep the mill operating, and still maintain like your historic preservation efforts, because there's still work that has to be done.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you're the director, figure it out. And I trust me, the month of March and April, I was extremely nervous. And on top of that, I'm a massively extroverted person. And I had to be introverted because I had to work from home. And the staff, we divvied up the days. Like, one person would be on a Tuesday, and then the next person would be on a Wednesday, so we weren't there at the same time.
Okay.
But we wanted to make sure we were in to check mail, to do our jobs that we can in the office. And I was like, okay, what do we do now? And I started looking at grants. I started leaning into my connections in the museum field about, like, hey, what are some funding sources that maybe people aren't aware of yet? And I remember when the PPP money came out.
Oh, yeah.
I learned about that before most people, and so I applied and got it much faster than everybody else. And then I started telling my colleagues, like, hey, you got to do this. This money's going to dry up. You got to go get it now. And then I launched a midsummer fundraiser. And then I did a capital campaign for our mill. And people say, hey, we can't have the art show, but you can contribute to the historical organization. The people who would normally come to the art show started sending us money. And then on top of all that, so we're not looking at just financial shortfalls, but we're looking at volunteer shortfalls. Because the mill, our historic mill, most of our volunteers were over the age of 65. And in July, when we could open back up, all but one were like, I don't feel comfortable coming in. I'm 70 plus years old. I just don't feel comfortable coming in, even with masks, mandates, and social distancing. So then I had to do an aggressive volunteer call, and all of these parents were like, "Please take my kid, get them out of the house. I am losing my mind." And I remember some of these kids showed up, and they were like, "I don't even like history. Why am I here?" But after that first day, they were there, like, "Oh, it's kind of cool, actually." And I was like, see? And I tried to make it fun. I tried to make it like after a grind, we'd joke around. I'd find out what their interests were. We'd talk about their interests. So many of them like Marvel movies, and that became like a weekly discussion. I was like, okay, we got to rank these movies again. And everybody had a Marvel name, like, which Marvel character are you? And we had a kid everybody said he's definitely Spider-Man. Somebody else was Black Widow. They all unanimously voted me Doctor Strange. Which I proudly wear that badge, because they're like,
I can see it, Nathan.
Because they said it's funny. It's like, you're our leader, and Dr. Strange is a leader. He's a smart leader, and you're a leader. I was like, oh, baby, that warmed my heart. And a lot of these volunteers, they stayed, and they're still there. 5 years later, they're still there, and then they started getting their friends, and then word got out throughout the community. It's like, hey, this is a great place for our kids to go volunteer. And then other people in the community like, well, I'm not a kid, but I'd like to volunteer. Now we've got this huge volunteer base at the mill, which was kind of lacking before. And now it's so nice because you've got the older generation, but you got this younger generation, and you see this baton being passed. Mm-hmm. And that to me, while getting the money for the mill dam was definitely financially my greatest achievement so far, growing that volunteer base at the mill is up there as far as like the achievements that I like the most. And I love how they rally around me. They respect me as the leader. They love working there with me. They're sharing ideas on how to do things, and they want to learn more about the mill, and I give everybody ownership of certain areas of the historic process, and it's great. I love it. This is why I love my Saturdays at the mill.
Yeah. Well, that says a lot about your leadership, the way in which, even just trying to connect with them on that level and figure out their interests and how you can connect with that, even if it wasn't an interest of yours, right. By the way, you said you didn't want to be a teacher, but I think you're a little bit of a teacher.
I think I kind of am. And it's interesting. I wear this middle friendship bracelet right here.
Yeah.
It says Karma on it. Our youngest mill volunteer, she was 13 years old. She overheard me saying that was my favorite Taylor Swift song, and the next week she made it for me, and I wear that constantly, just as a reminder of like the connection I have with my mill volunteers.
I love that. That is amazing. Actually, I saw those earlier, and I was going to ask about them. What are your others? Do you mind sharing?
Yes, absolutely. So the top one here, Godfather. My friend Lisa, the week I got married last year, my goddaughter was the flower girl.
Okay.
And she was 10 years old. And she loves Taylor Swift. So my friend Lisa, who makes these friendship bracelets, she made one for Godfather for me, one for God that says Goddaughter for her, with blue and purple beads. Blue is my favorite color. Purple is her favorite color.
Aww.
So I wear that every day, and my goddaughter wears hers every day. And then I told you about Karma. Always, again, my friend Lisa, she was one of my nearest and dearest friends here in Winchester, and she just got transferred to Pensacola, Florida, the Navy Federal down there. And on the way out, she made this one. Always, two reasons. One, Harry Potter. We both loved Harry Potter, and this was a line by Snape. But also that our friendship is always. So that's why I wear those three every day.
I love them so much. I had a friendship bracelet. I had a ton from my students, but there was a very special one that a student had. He came from Hawaii to begin with, and he had gone on a trip back to Hawaii, and he had made a special one there out of nice wooden beads.
Oh, nice.
Brought it back to me, and it was my favorite friendship bracelet. And let's see, how many years has it been at this point? Maybe 10 years. Maybe more than that, since he was in my class. And a couple of weeks ago, it broke, and the beads went everywhere, and I was heartbroken. Like gathering the beads, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with them now. But I love that you wear yours.
Yeah, I do. Cool. Every day, I get asked about them, and when I tell people, they're like, because they were like, why is this man who's 48 years old wearing these, friendship bracelets? When I tell them the story, like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm very much I'm sentimental. I'm a very sentimental person, and so these three just kind of represent three very, very, very positive people and instances of my life.
Very cool. Well, I think that's actually a good segue. So we've been doing leadership in the wild and talking about people we identify as leaders in the community. Has there been anybody that stood out to you recently?
I would say, it's a couple. I would say one at the museum and one overall in the community. The overall community one is, I got to give a shout out to Christy Powers from Navy Federal. She's the board president of the Chamber of Commerce. Okay. And just watching how she leads people in a room. Like, she became board president, and watching her connect with people. Like, I'm pretty good at connecting with people, but I am in awe of how she does that.
Oh, wow.
Like, I love watching how she does just the little things that she does, and she knows how to build camaraderie. Okay. And I love that. And she comes across as somebody she's had to work hard for everything she's had in her life. And she conveys that, but she's also very thankful and very humble as well. And people see that. People realize that. And just the way she talks to people like she's known them for years. Okay. And people want to follow her lead. Like at the board meeting, she's very good at managing those meetings. She's very good at getting everybody happy and excited for these board meetings. And it makes people want to step up and do stuff. So I commend her leadership. I can't even imagine what she's like at Navy Federal as a leader. I'm just seeing her from the chamber standpoint and how she's really kind of elevating the stature. She's a good listener too. She's a leader that listens. And she doesn't just do it. It's like, well, I guess I have to. No, she actively listens to everybody that comes and talks to her about something.
What a great example.
Yeah, she's a great inspiration. On the other side, and I know she will hate me for saying this, but there's one of our mill volunteers, Lydia.
Okay.
She came to volunteer at the mill a few years ago. I just want to volunteer. This looks kind of fun. It's like, okay. And over the years, she's taken this ownership role of the mill in a lot of ways. She is learning the most in-depth things about the operations, the equipment, the historic artifacts in there. It's to the point where it comes to, I have a question about the mill, I go to her. I mean, she's just has immersed herself. But by doing so, people have started, like all the mill volunteers have kind of started to look to her as a leader. And it's almost like it just naturally happened. She wasn't trying to be.
Yeah.
It just naturally, there it is. She's the volunteer where people will go to and like, hey, I got a question on this. And hey, can you help me with this? And what do you think we should do here? She doesn't see herself as a leader. She's a leader.
Oh.
She's definitely those volunteers. Even the volunteers who've been there for 40 years, they will go to her. They will follow her lead. She doesn't realize it.
That is so cool, the folks that just naturally fall into it. It just seems so easy. Other people, it's like a constant study of how can I be a more effective leader, and I'm leading these people and I don't know how to do so properly. But then we have these people that it seems so natural, and people go to them for advice and know that they will listen. Whereas others, it might be, a science that they actually have to learn. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's really cool that you've identified someone that just naturally fell in. Someone on it, actually, I think it's... So Jeff Botta, Dr. Botta, I don't know if you know him, Kelly Botta's husband.
Yes.
From Kelly's from Smarty Pants Medicine. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He shared about his daughter at home and a great story of how she fell into a leadership role even with siblings. So I just think it's so cool, especially for younger folks, to naturally fall into it. Okay, so talking about the leadership side a little bit more, I know you alluded to earlier the importance of historical preservation as a part of learning about the past so we don't repeat history in ways that we don't want to. I just want to dig into the leadership side of it a bit more. I know we've spoken about how you've grown as a leader and the skills that you have to have on the historical preservation side, but just in general, we always say we have to learn from the past and learn from our history, but can you think of some specific examples where we should have been looking back? We could have looked back a little more effectively and made better decisions as a community or as a country, and we wouldn't have found ourselves in the same situation. Have you seen history repeat itself?
Oh, a lot of times. Oh, goodness. I could think of a million examples historically, especially on the national stage. It's, I think one example would be Vietnam is a great example. Us going into a country and not having really an exit strategy, and then it happened again in Iraq. And then you see other countries that did it, the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, when they were there in the 80s. This whole belief like, we're going to go in and change everything, but then they underestimate what's happening on the ground, and suddenly we're going to be there. We're going to be there maybe a few months, and now you're there a decade. Mm-hmm. The same thing happened in World War I. Both sides, the Axis and the Allies, are like, with all the technology we got, we'll be done in 2 or 3 months. And it became the bloodiest battle in human history. Wow. And it just, people, I think sometimes there's a little bit of ego. There's this belief that, we got this, we're the greatest on earth. But I think we in the United States, we're unfortunately geographically, we're bordered by 2 countries. Mm-hmm. You go somewhere in Europe, you can drive, 1,000 miles and cross 6 countries with 6 different cultures and 6 different languages and 6 different histories. You drive 2,000 miles across the United States, you still see more United States. Right. So I think there's a lot of, being able to, and we are in an age of the internet and globalization and social media, and it's always been my hope that we could maybe learn more from other cultures that way. Yeah. But I think learning from going back to the past and seeing ways that, like, hey, this didn't work before. Mm-hmm. Why do we think it's going to work now? Just because we've had better technology, it's still the same plan, and it's still going to have the same result. So not going in with a plan. Mm-hmm. Not going in with an exit strategy. Okay. That can even apply to daily life. I've seen numerous times where people will have a great idea for this historic property. Okay. but they don't know how to get to that idea.
Okay.
They don't know the steps. They're already thinking that they're already at the finish line and imagining what victory lane feels like. Mm-hmm. But they haven't started the car yet. Mm-hmm. They haven't maneuvered how they're going to get around all the obstacles to get there. They just know what that finish line is going to look like. And I've seen that a lot throughout my career. And I think that's something that people need to remember. Have a plan. Yeah. Have a plan from start to finish, and take your time and make every step count.
That's a really good point. I was also thinking about, as you said that, just in organizations in general, I've done a lot of talking recently about the generational differences within a workplace and having 5 generations there. A lot of times people will continue to do things the way that they've always done them. Yes. Maybe people that don't like change. Did you see? You identified that earlier, but I think there's a part of you that likes change there.
Okay, so I will say there is a caveat, I guess I should say. I like. It's funny. I don't like change. I'm the guy when I go to a restaurant. If there's one thing on the menu I like, every time I go to a restaurant, I get the same thing.
Yeah,
I'm extremely predictable.
I do the same thing.
But that being said, if you ask anybody who's ever worked with me, the one phrase you'll never hear from me at work, we've always done it this way. Mm-hmm. That is a phrase that just bothers me to no end.
Yeah.
You have to adapt. You have to innovate. Times change. Populations change. Needs and desires of the community change. Mm-hmm. Everything changes. You have to adapt to the times, and you got to get ahead of that sometimes.
Yeah.
And those who don't, that's going back to the whole like history. If you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Like, hey, this is how that was done before, and it didn't work. Let's just keep doing it that way. No, you have to adapt.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing for me is making, even when I've hired, like I recently hired a curator, as I mentioned, and my number one goal was like, I want this person to come in and put their own stamp on this, to use their creative talents, to grow the museum and grow the archives. And I don't want this, and I told her right off the bat, it's like, we don't have to do it the way we've always done it. I'm open. Do we need a new software system? Mm-hmm. Do we need we need new materials? Whatever we need, new resources. Maybe we think of different ways to connect with the community that we haven't done before. That's big, very, very important.
Yeah. Well, I see people leave one organization and go to another. It made me think of what you said about learning from other cultures and other countries, right? Well, I see someone leave an organization and go to a new one, and things are done in a very different way, right? And they bring these new ideas to the table, and there might be some pushback, like, you're the new guy here, right? You know, what are you doing coming here and telling us what to do? But those people that are open to the idea, sometimes they've had better technology over here, and you're exposing them to opportunities with technology to support what you're doing so more efficiently, right? But we have to be open to that.
Yes.
Which can be difficult.
It can be difficult. It really can be. When I first started as director at CCHA, Lord knows, the first thing I heard was like, we've always done it this way by a lot of people in the community. I was like, well, you hired me to do something different. And so what I would recommend for that, for people who are like facing that, it's like, hey, they're saying they always done it this way. This is not what I'm used to. Time and patience, build that connection, build that camaraderie with the people you're working with, adapt, learn their working styles, kind of show them your working styles. That's what I would do there. And then over time, suddenly you're like making incremental change, and then that incremental change gets a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, you look back, you're like, oh wow, look where we were at 5 years ago compared to now. Night and day different.
Well, even understanding the history of the organization from the beginning, right? So you join a team, maybe you learn about how they've done things in the past couple of years, but to be able to actually explore the history of the business and the way things have changed over time up until that point, that's an opportunity, just like what you're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly.
To learn how it's been done in the past and which of those things could we bring back that maybe was done so successfully. Yeah. I just think that's a great opportunity, and in looking at history of an organization, not just in a community or of the country. I learned this from someone recently. Did you know, you probably know this, that you can put into Google like specific topics that you want, kind of a weekly digest of anything that pops up about those topics? Well, I do it for all of my clients. So like this week, I got this really amazing article about the history of one of my clients' businesses, and it blew my mind. There was so much that I didn't know. I forwarded to them. I'm like, oh my gosh, look what I learned about you today. We have so much to talk about. But even exploring that has been helpful to me in understanding how to best support them as well.
Oh, for sure. We live in a great age with technology. You know, I think there are some people, as AI is coming along and better search, capabilities are coming along on the internet, there are some in the history fields like, oh no, this could ruin us. It's helped.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie. That kind of technology helps. It really has. Like it allows you to get that history out there more, talk about it in a better way. AI is something that I will say that I know a lot of people in museums embrace wholeheartedly.
Okay.
It helps with grants. It helps with press releases. It helps with all kinds of stuff. It also helps, like, imagine, for example, if you said, I have this program, this history program I want to do, but I want to tailor a press release to a Gen Z audience. It'll shoot out a few things and some ideas and suggestions that go with it, and it makes the job a lot easier, because then it's like, what if you were, what if your staff are all boomers and Gen Xers, and you're like, we want to do this kids program, we want to connect with the Gen Zers, but I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it shoots it right out.
That is so cool.
It's so yeah. I like that.
Is this how you learned about Marvel characters too?
No, I did my own research on that by watching the movies during COVID. So
great use of time.
Yes,
exactly. But I'm glad that you said that, because I know I've heard several people, maybe even my dad, to be completely honest, that has concern about AI, making people not access history and forget about history and its importance. But if you're saying that it's actually been helpful in sharing what has happened in the past and getting people involved, that's wonderful news.
It is. It's sort of like, look at those who have those concerns, like, oh, it's not teaching people the actual history, especially your students. And like, there's a student says, you know what, I don't have time to research this. AI, I need a paper on, the War of 1812. Boom, shoots it out. There's going to be a lot of inaccuracies in there, and a lot of professors and teachers knows, like, you did not write that.
Yeah,
I wrote that.
It's pretty obvious.
But on the flip side of that, museums can use that to better promote their message and connect better with audiences and say the right things, and it saves you time. And I love it. Like, I swear by it. It has definitely been beneficial to me. It's helped me write better grants. It's helped me do better promotion. I very much like it. I know a lot of people in museums, they say, let's go to town and use this AI for it.
Do you have a specific program that you use that you recommend?
ChatGPT.
That's the one you use. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's the most common, but there are a lot of people out there using different ones.
And I will say, like, I know there were those same concerns when Wikipedia came out.
Oh.
Years ago, it was Wikipedia's like, oh, this is actually not history. And trust me, history professors, if you're a student, you turn in a history paper and you cited Wikipedia, that's an immediate F, because it's not anybody can edit Wikipedia pages. So it's kind of the same thing, but Wikipedia is still around. Think of Wikipedia and ChatGPT and AI as a reference point, as a foundation base.
Yeah.
You don't copy it word for word. You're just like, okay, this is giving me an idea where to start.
Yeah, that's a
good point.
Then
you take it from there.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people need to hear that, because that's a lot of the pushback is people feel like, oh, it's not going to be my original work if I use that. Well, what if it's just the foundation and it gets you started with ideas and then you make it your own?
That's exactly it, yeah. I'm the kind of person, I'm terrible at writing something. Okay. Once I get that first paragraph down, I'm fine, but I always struggle with that opening paragraph. AI helps me get that first paragraph down, and from there, I'm like, boom, I can write it from here.
I had no idea we'd talk about AI today. You just never know. Yeah. We're branching out here, Nathan. Okay, so a segment that we've started doing is Leadership Unscripted. And so I know that I shared this prompt with you that we got as a submission, and I'll share it out loud here. So those of you that might be listening to our podcast for the first time, we're just taking listener submissions of any challenges, questions related to leadership that people might have, and providing some feedback with a guest or just myself if it's a solo episode. So today's says, I crave structure, but my team thrives in chaos. I've tried to bring in systems, planning tools, and timelines, but my creative team pushes back and says it stifles innovation. How do I lead a team whose workflow doesn't match mine? So we'll start with you, Nathan. I'm curious what your thoughts are, and then I'll add some feedback along the way.
So I would say this is definitely one of the things I've learned in my career is working with people who have very different work styles. I'm a very calendar-driven person, so I get the craving the structure.
Yeah.
And I've had to work with chaos. And it always, I'll even say, even my personal life, my wife is not a planner. She is very much if we have a weekend off, she'll wake up on a Saturday morning, like, oh, let's drive down to Virginia Beach. I'm like, right now? How are we going to get there? Are we going to stop? What are we going to do? Like, I'm very much... So it's finding some middle ground. So what I've done in my career when I've had to confront this, and I have several times, this is a great question, is the first thing I do is I want to try to learn more details about their work styles, and then also share that with them. The 16 personalities test, Myers-Briggs test, I've found everywhere I've used those, it's helped me understand the people around me more.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, I remember I had a person working for me last year who I was surprised he came across as a little unprofessional. He gave me some pushback on something, and it came across as a little unprofessional. And I was very unhappy with it. And then I sat down and we talked about our work styles, and then we did the 16 personalities test. And so he read mine and I read his, and then we both sat down together and we were like, I get it. Like, I absolutely get it, because his work style, he's an introverted, very logical person, doesn't deviate from logic whatsoever. If anything's out of the norm, it gives him his greatest anxiety.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm very much we got to get it done, let's go. I'm the extrovert, I'm the dynamic one, and that's a hard leadership for him to mesh with. He likes somebody who just gives him quiet structure and lets him be, whereas I'm very much we all have to talk. And when we sat down and understood that, I was like, oh, I get it. You weren't being mean. This is just a part of your personality. And likewise, he's like, I get it. You're not trying to be micromanaging. You are an ENTJ. You are actually trying to, this is your personality.
Yeah. And
how can we make those balances work? So when a coworker's like, oh, this method is driving me nuts, but if it works for them, you got to find a happy medium. Okay, let's do this part of it your way. But for me, as your leader, I have to do things a certain way, and I need you to meet me halfway on this. I'll come down, look, I'm not going to micromanage you and give you all kinds of schedules and this by this date, this by this date.
Right.
Here's your work plan, but here is your work plan. This is what I want done, and let's work together on how we can find the middle ground. Yeah.
That is such a great example. I'm glad that this question was asked when you were here specifically. It makes me think about, as a math teacher, there was always one right answer for many of the math questions, right? But I never wanted to teach one way to get there. I didn't really want to teach any formulas. I would let them all try it on their own and figure out, whether they're using math manipulatives or whatever, how can they arrive at the answer? And it was so cool to see how everyone was so different and how they processed information but could arrive at the same solution. I think that exercise is so valuable, but I feel like it applies here too, because it's about the shared outcome. If you guys can agree upon, right, the outcome and are clear in what that looks like, and then have an understanding of the needs along the way, I feel like there's some scaffolding that can happen. And it's like you said, meeting in the middle. So maybe rather than meeting every day and him feeling micromanaged, it's we do a once a week check-in, and these are the things you bring to the table. That's right?
Exactly it, yes.
I don't feel like it has to be opposites. I feel like it's so complementary to be so different, because there's also some blind spots that might be occurring based on the way that you're wired and how you're approaching it. So this is a great question, and I feel like it's very common, especially in I work with a lot of interior design firms, and so there are a lot of creatives, and they actually they know that there's so much value in having someone around who's more structured and strategic to help ground them, which is cool that they see that. But if that's a blind spot for them, sometimes it takes a conversation to say, hey, you're bouncing around a lot. We're only trying something for 5 minutes before we give up and move on to something else. And they need someone to point it out. So I think just having that open conversation and being able to even be transparent about, what fears you might have associated with going to Virginia Beach, the day of planning it.
Yes.
And you know what I mean?
Oh, yes.
Like, I feel like being open with your team about this is why I think this way, you know?
And I would also encourage to take that a step further. I would encourage having those conversations in a casual setting.
Yeah.
Somewhere where everybody's relaxed. So you're not having to meet, okay, we got to have a meeting to talk about this. Then the guards are up. We actually, when I had that incident happen with with one of my staff, it was, I remember he, like I said, he kind of clapped back at me, and it turns out when we talked about it in a casual setting, it was, he's like, I get it. It wasn't the message. Like, I'm always open for feedback, but you got to do it in a more professional manner. And he's like, I get it. It wasn't the message. It was the delivery. He was like, that's exactly it. And I said, likewise, I probably shouldn't have come across as overly stern when you expressed those concerns, and it just led to potential chaos. But we sat down, casual setting, and everybody's relaxed. Like, let's just chill out a second. Let's go to lunch, and let's talk about this.
But they're part of building the solution that way, right?
Yeah.
And so they're bought into the solution because you're asking feedback as well throughout that process, and you know what supports each of you need.
And you have to, and even as a leader, you can't, yes, as a leader, there's a tendency, it's like, hey, I'm the boss, we're going to do it my way. And you can't do that. You really can't. You got to adapt to the strengths of those under you. Like, you're only as good as the people that work for you. And you have to adapt to those strengths. But they also, you as a leader, you also have to say, here's how we need to make your strengths and my strengths work together.
Yeah.
And that's I would say the only time I've ever had to pull the I'm the director, we're doing it my way card is at the mill. We had a mill volunteer who wanted to change the settings for the millstones to where they were too tight, which could have caused damage.
Oh, okay.
And that's the only time I've ever had to say, no, we're doing it my way. I'm the boss. In the story.
That's understandable.
Yeah. But everything else, find that middle ground. But listen. That's active listening, understanding where their strengths are. Because if you're trying to get your staff to work in your style, that's awful. A great example.
It's a terrible idea.
It's a terrible idea. A great sports analogy would be like if you hire a head coach who loves a pocket passing quarterback, but the quarterback he inherited is a running quarterback, and he says, you're great at running, but you cannot do that anymore. I need you to stand back there and throw the ball. Well, guess who? There's going to be a lot of attention there.
And I'm so glad you brought up the assessments too. So the DISC assessment is like foundational for all the work that I do. It's my favorite thing to do. So every single client, we have like a 45-page DISC and emotional intelligence assessment. And we use it to get to know each other quickly too. If we're going to be working together long term, then I know how to best present things to them and vice versa. So such a valuable tool. I love that you're using assessments.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because every time I've done it in every step of my career, I know staff is usually like, I don't want to do this. But once we do it, then we talk about it in a casual setting. It actually makes it kind of fun because you're learning so much about them, not as coworkers, but as what is it like in the workplace, but personally, what's their personality traits like? And
they learn so much about themselves too. Some people are a little resistant to that in the beginning because I feel like they're afraid of what's going to come out on that piece of paper.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think it's a great experience. Well, thank you for sharing your insight on that. That's very helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I do. I enjoy trying to find ways we can all work together. And I work in a small museum. We got a staff of 4. So teamwork and chemistry is everything.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that leaves us at the branching out challenge. So what do we want to challenge our listeners to do based on something we've talked about today? So let's go back to this is being released on Independence Day. We've talked about the importance of history and historical preservation. What do you want to challenge our listeners to do?
Well, given that it is Independence Day, let's think about democracy. And let's think about, I challenge the listeners to think of how you can reach out to your elected officials and how you can have constructive conversations with them. Not raising concerns or something. It could be you're concerned about local taxes. It could be concerned about a certain bill. But just having those constructive conversations with them. Going out and go to a Board of Supervisors meeting. Just sit and listen, learn. Watch them on YouTube. You can watch them on YouTube. And just kind of that will help you slowly understand the process and slowly understand how you can eventually sit down with those elected officials and say, hey, these are my concerns. Can you help me? And that helps you grow.
Yeah.
That helps them grow. It helps you grow. Your voice is getting heard. That's the best way to do it. So that's one thing I would say, especially in honor of Independence Day and us and us establishing a democracy here in this country. I would say you'll learn a little bit more about local politics and elected officials.
I think a big piece of that, too, is no one loves to hear all the problems but no solutions. So when you're coming forward with a concern, maybe have some ideas of what can actually be done about them.
Yes.
Instead of just complaining.
Yeah, don't go in and complain. It's like, hey, this is how it's affecting us. These are the numbers. Oh, go in with data. They always love data.
Yeah.
And go in with that. Dude, I'm a numbers guy myself.
I figured that out. I think we have similar styles, except you're much more extroverted than me.
I'm very, very extroverted, yes.
Yeah.
It drives my wife nuts. We'll walk down the walking mall, and by the time we get between the parking lot and El Centro, I've seen like 6 people I know, and she's like, I'm so hungry. Please stop talking.
That's so funny. We end up with like opposites, right?
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Yeah. Oh, it's a nice balance. It's a nice balance.
Yeah, I was going to say you can't both talk all the time.
No. But no, I would take the advocacy away from that. That's what I would, with 4th of July, that's what I would say. If we could take something away from that and overall, active listening, whether it's on advocacy, whether it's as a leader, just really sit down and listen and don't play I'm the leader, we're doing it my way card.
Yeah.
Always listen and find the middle ground.
That's great. I love your challenge. It's a good one. I'm curious where people can find information about Clarke County Historical Association. You used the acronym earlier, and no one's ever used that before. I always try and say the whole thing, and I'm like, oh, I've been making this so difficult all along. Where can people find you? We'll put the links with the episode too, or anything specific to the mill. I think the mill has its own Facebook page, right?
It does, yes.
Okay.
Facebook and Instagram pages.
Okay, share with us. Where can we find you?
So we're at Burwell Morgan Mill for those that think I just said Burrell, but it's pronounced Burrell, but it's the Burwell Morgan Mill on Instagram and on Facebook, and at Clarke History. Clarke is spelled with an E for those who are not from around here. Clarke is spelled with an E at the end. So at Clarke History on Facebook and Instagram, and clarkehistory.org is our website. And so you can find all kinds of information. In fact, we have an online searchable database on our website. So all kinds of stuff in our collections have been digitized. You can keyword search anything. There's tons and tons and tons of resources there.
What a great resource. Is there anything that you wanted to share today that you didn't get the opportunity to?
Well, I got to say, one of the things I will say is being a leader in a nonprofit, I was so excited when I became a director. Okay. But the one thing that made me nervous is working for a board of directors.
Okay.
And no matter how many books are out there, it will never prepare you for what it's like. Every board's different. And it took some time. I would say if you're going to be a leader and you report to a board of directors, be patient.
Yeah.
Grow. Like, you get to know them, get to know the community, and one by one you're going to start getting people to join the board because they believe in what you're doing. And you'll have board members on there who weren't there when your predecessor was there. Mm-hmm. And really, really learn your community and get to know your community. And that's going to help your board. That's going to help your organization. It's going to make your life a lot easier. But be patient working with a board of directors, because you're sometimes 13, 15 people you're having to address at the same time. And just be patient with that. And
I think on the reverse side, I know I've sent you folks before that, needed help and understanding of how to be an effective board member on the opposite end of it, too. I feel like you're very experienced on both sides there.
I've given talks on that at museum conferences. Yeah, so being a board member, too, also listen again, active listening to everybody else, listen to all ideas, be supportive, of your community and what your organization is doing, and find your strengths. Don't try to do every position on the board at once. Just find your strengths. You're on the board because you provide a strength. And you can be an effective board member by utilizing your strengths and learning from everybody else.
There's so much value in that exercise. I know I've led it with a couple of boards that I work with in literally going around and identifying everyone's strengths, everyone's networks that you can tap into as well, and really just brainstorming and putting it all out there, forming committees based on where the strengths lie, and just being so much more strategic instead of everybody trying to do everything.
Right. Yeah. No, when you're more strategic, I mean, when you look at my board, you've got this person's great at building and grounds, this person's great at finance, this person's great at research, and we've got all of these different strengths. And everybody comes together, and when we come to meet as board members, the board comes together and they talk. Even if you're on a board, it's the same thing. You're seeing people with different strengths and different backgrounds, and you're providing something different. Even on the Chamber's board of directors, I am the nonprofit guy from Clarke County. There's not a lot of those walking around. So I provide a perspective that a lot of other people don't, and likewise everybody else on that board has a perspective, being what their business is or the location or their experience, that are very different from everybody else, but it helps everybody understand and work together as a team.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm glad that you got to include that too, because I was thinking about that earlier because I was talking to Chandra, who is one of the people that I sent your way to talk about, being an effective board member. So I'm glad you brought it up. It was on my mind, but I had forgotten.
Oh, yes. No, absolutely. No, this is great.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and adding value to our audience. I really do appreciate it. You're having a really big impact in the community and beyond. So thank you for all the advocacy that you've been a part of.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here, and I'm always happy to talk advocacy and leadership, anything like that. I can't tell you how important it is to not only advocate for your organization, but your community. Advocate for your community. Be that voice in your community. Be that person that people will want to come. It's like, hey, I would like your assistance on this, or hey, I would like to follow your lead on this. Work towards that. Advocate.
Yeah. I love it. Great message. Well, thank you, sir.
All right,
we'll have to have you back again sometime.
I'll be happy to.
All right. Well, I hope you found value in today's episode. If you can think of anyone that would benefit from listening to what Nathan shared with us today, be sure to share this. Also, I had mentioned we'd love to hear from you. If you have any specific questions or challenges, feel free to email info@branchingoutpodcast.com so that we can take your suggestions and questions. Also, don't forget to subscribe. We have an episode that comes out every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time, so you can grab those notifications and hop on and listen in. Thank you so much for choosing to be with us today and continue to learn and grow alongside us. Until next time, keep branching out.